Try this again. Welcome to Performant Libraries. My name is Ryan Schooley. I work at BML Today we'll be discussing how to use Drupal's library system to help better your site's performance. So hopefully by the end of this you're a little intrigued and want to dig in and learn more. So. Alright, when we first started talking about libraries, most of the questions we got were, are you talking about jQuery or something? Like, we know about those libraries. But actually no. So libraries in D8 are basically just a collection of CSS and JS files that you'll define in the libraries YAML file. So the libraries YAML is one of the files you have to create a theme. And so if you've never worked with YAML, which probably most of us have, if you've touched D8, it's pretty easy syntax to grasp. It's basically just tabs and some lists, hyphenated lists. Core, one thing you should know getting into this, Core actually ships with like 10 or so libraries out of the box. A few of those being jQuery. jQuery is now you have to actually add it to your theme. It used to be loaded on all the pages in D7, but you can actually add it as a dependency. We'll get into dependencies a little bit later, but if we're breaking down this screenshot, line 21 is our global definition, and that's what you're going to have basically as a base for all the sites you create. So you're going to have a global definition that has your main CSS and JS file. Typically, in the past, we would have created a single CSS and single JS file, and then that would house basically all of your styles and all of your scripts for the site, and we would load that on every page, right? So with libraries, and what we'll get through today, you'll kind of learn how to start to break those out, and that's going to help limit your page load and weight. So it can be pretty powerful. You can attach libraries to just about anything, so any entity, any content type, node, block, views. If you're using paragraphs, which we use quite a bit of, you can attach to those, and then all their respective display modes. So view modes, form modes, pretty much anything. There's a lot more. So that's library and its definition in terms of D8. So how can these libraries impact performance? I mentioned this earlier. It can decrease your page load, right? So this is a huge thing when it comes to search engine optimization and ranking. It can impact your time to first paint, time to first meaningful paint, time to interactive. Those are all things you can measure, and we'll talk about some tools that actually help you do that. But this is probably the biggest impact that it can have in terms of performance and just how your site is loading. That can lead to user abandonment, right? So poor performance, users have a short attention span, right? They want it now, they want it fast. And if you're not giving it to them quick enough, then they'll go find their content somewhere else, right? Definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration. Along with that, a loss of conversion. So fewer visitors means fewer conversions, whether that's actual e-commerce sale or white paper download or whatever your metric is you're you're trying to convert against. Ultimately, those loss of conversions can potentially affect your bottom line, right? Whether directly or indirectly. And to be honest, businesses want to make money, right? So, yeah. So what is the library system's role in all of this, right? It allows us to, what exactly would you say you do here, libraries? So it allows us to only add the necessary CSS and JS to the page. It's going to, our designers, they'll want fancy form styles. They want style select boxes and placeholders that turn into labels, right? We don't need that CSS or JS on the page unless we have a form on the page, right? So why add that extra weight when it's not really necessary? So defining those libraries and then attaching them when it's relevant is going to get us there. The next thing that it does for us is it tells Drupal how to treat or how to use our CSS and JS. So by default, V8 is going to put all your scripts at the bottom of the page, right? It's a good practice. But you may have a scenario where you need to load a JS file in the head. You can do that very easily by just adding, I think it's header true, in your library definition. And then same with CSS, you can weight CSS to control cascading. You can also tell it if the CSS impacts layout or if it's a component or a modifier. So it basically just loads that as needed or as necessary. So it can be pretty powerful. All right, so how do we start doing this? Well, the easiest way, at least for us, has been adopting a naming convention. And so that naming convention is pretty similar to what you're familiar with template files, right? So we follow entity type, hyphen view mode, hyphen bundle convention. And the idea here is with each level, you gain some specificity. So you'll see node, which is our entity type, and teaser, which is a view mode, is pretty generic. So this is going to be across all content types using the teaser view mode, right? So your base styles for teasers are going to live in that library definition. And then you can build upon that and add the bundle specific, so your content type, in this case article, on top of those base styles. So you'll actually, for a article in the teaser view mode, you'll have a couple of libraries attached to it, both the node teaser and the node teaser article. So very similar to how template files work, right? You have hierarchy. So that's the first part of it. The next part here is the paragraph full gallery. So that's just showing, we have an entity type paragraph, but that specific paragraph is the gallery, and we're going to display it in the full. We treat libraries a little bit differently, and components, and we basically set those up so that we end up creating those as dependencies on our entity libraries. So you'll see, it's not in this screenshot, I'll get to it in the next one, but our external library here, the example is Slick Slider. And so we will load those external scripts in the definition.
It's down at the bottom.
Yeah, there it is. Sorry. There's a little bit of a glare, so I should probably read off this one. But Yeah, so our libraries, they follow just the convention, library hyphen hyphen, and then the library name. And then components, we have here component and hyphen hyphen overlay. Overlay or components would be like, what are the components you're going to share across multiple entities. So in this instance, overlay would be maybe you have a gallery that opens in an overlay, maybe you have a login block that opens in an overlay, and you want to be able to reuse that component across multiple entities. So this naming convention allows us to do quite a bit. We base our CSS and JS partials off of that as well. So it's very similar. We lead with the asset type, so CSS and JS, and then we have libraries, and then our entity type is actually a directory in this case. And then our view mode and bundle is what the actual file name is based off of. So you can see here we're talking about the hero slide paragraph, and it's in the full view mode. So we're going to load our style specific to that paragraph. So setting up this naming convention, this is like where all the where we get to basically the magic happens, right? So it allows us to do automatic attaching, which will get us basically close to 100%, probably 95% of our library attachment is done via preprocess. So defining the library in the YAML file is only going to get you so far. You have to actually attach it to the entity that you want to load the library onto. So, and you can do that a number of ways. We use preprocess just because, like I said, it gets us, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. But you can attach it. If you have a custom block, you can attach it in your build function. If you're attaching it to a layout, you can do it in layouts YAML. You can do it in your twig templates. I mean, that's probably the other most common way to attach libraries. But adhering to this naming convention and then following these 20 lines, and I'm not going to get too deep into what this is actually doing, but following these 20 lines, it gets us pretty far. To quickly just go through this, the prefix is our entity type in our naming convention. The view mode is obviously the view mode, and then our bundle is the bundle. So that's our your content type, actual machine name, article, whatever, basic or page. Sorry. So you're going to go and set up those variables, and then you're going to go and grab your active themes and place them into an array, and then start to actually attach the libraries. Typically, you're only going to have one active theme in your array, but with our the distribution that we use, we assume that you may be creating a multi-site, so you're using the same single code base for multiple sites and could have potentially multiple themes. So it's going to take those active themes and then it's going to start to attach them based on our conventions. So a lot of work can be done in just your using this and setting up your libraries YAML. Yeah. So let's see. Sorry. I did want to plug real quickly the distribution that we have been working on at VML Y&R. It's called Kit. I have links at the end of this and then an appendix where you can go and review the distribution. It's on GitHub, and anyone can use it. So yeah, check it out. Garrett Rathbone had a talk about it earlier this afternoon. Touched on a lot of things that he had learned through that process. But yeah, have a look. All right, so all that's great. Let's see an actual example. So in this scenario, I'm going to use a article content type and say that we have the ability to add a slider to the page, and then we want that slider to display in an overlay on top of the page. So we're going to define 4 libraries here: the node full article, the slider paragraph, our third-party slick slider, and then the overlay component. And just because we have the ability to add a slider to an article doesn't necessarily mean we have to add the slider JS and CSS to the page, right? Like I said earlier. So let's just go through here and break down each definition and really what its role is going to take. So your full article is essentially just going to be like your base fields, your required fields for article, right? What do you know that's going to be on every single article page? You know, you're probably going to have a title, you're going to have your byline, your date, you know, maybe a hero image. So that's going to be your base styles. The paragraph definition is going to have dependencies on our slick library and the overlay component. Your styles here are just going to be, you know, what is on top of what slick is providing you and their base styles, right? So you might have some special arrows or something for your navigation, your slider. Then we have our library definition that's going to pull in our external scripts and CSS. You want to break this down into its own definition because, again, you may have other entities that are utilizing a slick slider, right? Not just this particular paragraph on this particular node. So you'll notice you can define, these are obviously being served from a third party or a CDN, so it has the full absolute path to it, and then we just define that this is a external script and that our JS is minified, and it just gives, again, Drupal a little more context into how to treat these files. And then the last one, again, our overlay component, you know, it's potentially shared across multiple entities, so you know, we just make it a component and make sure it can be shared. Yeah, so as long as you're using the naming convention and the pre-process, you know, all of these would be attached accordingly. Alright, so how do we know it's actually working for us? The easiest way is to just monitor your network tab. I mean, this is at a minimum you should be monitoring this, making sure that only the JS or CSS that you want to add to the page is being loaded. On this one, I think I'm specifically looking at just the CSS. So every browser has a version of DevTools, and it should have a network tab in it. The next thing we use is Lighthouse, and this is through Chrome DevTools, and there's just a little quick rundown on what it provides you if you're not super familiar with it. It can provide more than just performance audits. It'll give you some best practices, accessibility, SEO, So it's a pretty handy tool. I'll show you what the output of this looks like here shortly. All right. So a recent project example, actual real-world example. So this is a article on a site that we recently built, and there's a few things here to just kind of monitor. I touched on a couple of them earlier. Your first content paint, first meaningful paint, like when can people actually start to interact with your site that you want to monitor. And we have a saying at VMLYNR that to not chase numbers, but I mean I'm fairly happy with this 90 that's in the top right corner. It takes a bit to get there, and honestly CSS and JS, like what we're talking about today in libraries, is not going to take your site from a 60 all the way up into the 90s, but it's going to give you, it's going to have an impact. So this is just a small part of it. This particular example, I think our CSS load on the page was like 25K, something like that, and our overall page weight was about, I think, a little over half a meg, so 500K, which a little more than what we want, but there were a few images on the page in the hero or above the fold, and so it just happened. But so as an example, what I did locally, I took this same site and I just put all of our partials, all of our CSS partials into a single file and just loaded the kitchen sink. I mean, everything. And that single CSS file was actually over 500K. And so it basically, just that alone doubled our page weight and load. And our numbers obviously dipped. The biggest impact it had was your first content paint. I think that ended up being at like 5 seconds. So the score dipped only, I think, maybe 20 points or so. But if you picture just adding 3 seconds to your page load just right off the bat, I mean that's pretty significant. I believe, yeah. I was nervously talking and going very fast. So here we are, 22 minutes into it. So yeah, I guess we have time for Q&A. If anyone has any questions.
Performance dip from having to create new bundle CSS and JS for every page?
Performance?
Right, because you're only including the JavaScript and the CSS you need for that page instead of one big file that I've got cached on my browser and getting lots of smaller files.
You definitely get more files, but with aggregation and minification, I mean you're not going to see a huge difference there. Maybe I'm not following, but yeah. Yeah, that does make
the benefit is bigger than the need. Gotcha.
Yeah.
You haven't noticed any difference?
No. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. What were you saying, Jake? Sorry.
Just that the benefit outweighs any dip from loading those multiple files.
Yeah.
That's why you don't notice it, just because you get such more benefit than you do drawback.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's the appendix. There's a few links in there, and these slides and the presentation will be up on the site, on the schedule page.